going to commence with our panel discussion now. It was a great press conference. I appreciate you all being there. The first thing I'd like to do is just go around, and I'm going to ask you just to introduce yourself briefly, because we've got lots of questions. Briefly, please introduce yourself, and tell us a little about the role that you play for successful reintegration, or why you have an interest in reentry. So let's start with Charlie Grady. Charlie, go ahead, Charlie.
Good afternoon.
You got to push the button to talk.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm not used to that button. My name is Charlie Grady. I'm the founder of a reentry program titled Hang Time. We've been in existence for 8 years under the umbrella of Hang Time as a community support network and organization. We primarily focus on individuals coming home from incarceration, their families, and all the services that are needed to maintain and sustain a function of society without recidivism. We have Her Time as another program, a sister program that was created under Hang Time. We also have a program that deals with youth called Choices, as well as a program called Hang Time Mobile, where we actually take people from communities, Bridgeport, New Haven, Waterbury, outside of the state to actually learn firsthand, feel, touch, and experience actual historic sites within a 5-hour bus ride of Connecticut. We've been in existence since 2014, just celebrated 8 years of existence, and we have recently joined partnership with Career Resources, which will give us a much further reach in the work that we do every day. I'm former law enforcement. The reason, my why, is because I see the actual need for ongoing support versus just imprisoning folks.
Thank you, Charlie. Mark?
Good afternoon, everyone. Morning. Good morning, everyone. And if we continue, Scott, going from left to right or right to left, I'm in big trouble. Either I'm after Senator Wong or I'm after Charlie Grady. It's going to be a very hard afternoon for me. Mark Pelka. I work at the Office of Policy and Management, Criminal Justice Policy and Planning Division Undersecretary, and I care about reentry from all the fronts that we get to engage in criminal justice system issues. We produce a number of research and data analysis reports on a monthly and annual basis. We analyze data from across the criminal justice system and try to give a monthly tracker of indicators. We also look at system trends, so you have a sense of what's happening year to year, over a 5-year period, or over a decade. And the community supervision and a sentence reentry population is a critical part of that to understanding how populations are moving, what outcomes we're seeing, and how we can better support the work that goes on every day across our state to help returning citizens succeed in the community. We also, and I'll be briefer, we administer several federal grants. We convene stakeholders from across the criminal justice system and work on policy development and implementation. So all those areas experience the cross-cutting issue of reentry, and that's the goal, right? Is that for people who touch a system to not touch it again, help make people increase their chances of success and support them. So I'll end it there, or else I'll keep going. But thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mark. Senator Wong.
Hi, State Senator Tony Wong again. What a great press conference. I want to thank all the people that gave their insights. This report is so important, and it's even more important to have Mark sitting to my left here offering some of his insights and vision from the Office of Policy and Management, because as the question that evolved to in the whole conversation, the press conference it is about the commitment and the funding to create a better ecosystem for reducing recidivism. So I'm grateful for Mr. Pelka for being part of the panel and the foundation for being present, but most important of all, the correctional commissioner to be present as well. So what an illustrious body, and I'm very eager and I'm honored to be a part of this, and thank you. And I want to also recognize Representative Jill Berry, who's in the audience as well and offering her support and attending. Thank you.
Chris.
Good morning, Chris Rosario, State Representative, 128th District, and I'm so thankful for this report, because it really is going to show us the data, where we need to focus, be laser focused on the needs, the things that fall through the cracks. And then at the press conference, I do want to acknowledge to my colleagues, I do have a bill that addresses the IDs for folks coming home, and I look forward to work with the commissioner and his staff. It's House Bill 5333, which is in judice, and I want to thank Senator Winfield and Representative Stastrom because they're working on that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Robin?
Thank you.
I should know how to do this, right, y'all? Representative Robin A. Porter. I represent Hampton and New Haven. That's the 94th House District. I am pleased to be here today and excited to be on this panel. As I stated earlier, it's not just a professional job that I'm doing in this capacity, but it is also personal. Not just my family member, but I mean friends and community members have been impacted disproportionately and marginalized. So I take this work seriously, and I'm proud to say that I am co-sponsoring the bill with Representative Rosario. It is a bipartisan bill. We also have Representative Fishbein, Representative Nolan, and some other Democrats on that bill to make sure that we get it over the finish line. That is a serious problem, and we heard that from Mr. Fred earlier and other folks that have come home. They need their IDs. The other thing that I just want to tout real quick is, as the former labor chair, also did a lot of work on collateral consequences of a criminal record, and last year we were able to pass a bill that deals with occupational licensing, which is something that is very critical to those coming home, and making sure that a felony conviction is not held against them, but there is a vetting system in place that actually substantiates whether they can practice as practitioners or not. So looking forward to this and very excited to start this conversation with the folks on this panel because we happen to be the people closest to the power. Thank you.
Commissioner?
Good afternoon. Angel Quiros, Commissioner of the Connecticut Department of Correction. I'm excited to be here. This is some great work. I'm the individual that's going to be in charge of changing a culture, changing the correctional system so that it can be more progressive and more modern to today's society and today's needs. To me, it's an honor to, I grew up in Hartford. I grew up in the same neighborhood where Brian Sullivan did, that's here, that did time in the same system. And now I'm in charge, and now he's out here, and he's successful, seeing these success stories. This is important work, because the majority of these individuals, all they're looking is for an opportunity to be successful when they come back into society, to be taxpayers. I will tell you that I cannot do it by myself as the Commissioner, Department of Corrections. It takes the nonprofits, it takes the elected officials to have those tough conversations and properly fund some of these initiatives so that we can move the needle forward and continue to be a progressive, modern correction system. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Maggie?
Hi, good morning still. My name is Maggie Young, and I wear a number of hats. My interest actually in reentry is really about my lived experience. I'm a person who was formerly incarcerated for a number of years, and you know, if I were next to the warden, the commissioner, I would be taken off. I wouldn't be sitting right now. So I am a person in long-term recovery from substance use disorders. I was looking at the key findings, right, and I fit on each one. A person with 31 years. I am also very honored to be an inductee from the 2021 Hall of Change. And in my work, I am Chief Recovery Officer at Liberation Programs, recovery in my title because of the fact that I am all things recovery. I'm all about recovery, and I oversee a pregnant and parenting women and children's program where I work with women who are coming from and who need all of the services, and we need to be ready to be able to just kind of accept them as they are leaving prison and coming into treatment and leaving treatment and going into houses. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you, Maggie. Judy?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Judy McBride. I'm Director of Strategic Partnership Investments at the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving. And I've been with the foundation 16 years. And I've had the pleasure of working with many of the nonprofits and government representatives that are here today. And so there's no lack of talent in terms of folks on the ground working these issues. And we heard how we need resources, but we've also heard how it's harder than that. It actually requires coordination across the nonprofit ecosystem. So no one entity can do it. We have strong backbone organizations like Community Partners in Action, Capital Workforce Partners. The foundation has been there since I've been there, funding programs inside the prisons as well as outside the prisons. And I think my personal interest comes from the fact that from 1999 to 2001, I worked at the Department of Justice, and I was one of the aides that got the assignment from then Janet Reno, asking us to focus on making sure that folks who come out return to the communities, that we provide services inside the prisons that link to services outside. And we'll be talking about what progress we've made and what more needs to be done.
Thank you, Judy. What I'd like to do is put a question to the panel, and anyone can answer this, but the question is, for those concerned about reintegration and public safety, how would you frame the discussion with them to make them feel more comfortable about what is being done or can be done? Who'd like to take a stab at that?
I'll start.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Scott, you're right. Reintegration in neighborhoods, people will be concerned for their safety. But what you got to recognize is that 95% of these individuals that are incarcerated are going to come back out into society. They're going to be out in the school systems, in the malls, grocery stores. They may even be your next door neighbor. And so it'll be smart for us to do everything that we can do so that when these individuals come back into the community, they have a job, a home, and when I say a job, I'm talking about a meaningful job, a job that they can sustain themselves or their family. And I will guarantee you that that some of these individuals will probably commit another crime, but the majority of them will be taxpayers living next to you, and you will not even know that they've been incarcerated. And I can speak on that because I have immediate family members that have done 15 years in the same system now that I'm in charge, and they've been out for 19 years, and you wouldn't even know that these individuals have been incarcerated. So we should be concerned. However, the majority of them will come back out and be a great neighbor, a great citizen, and they're just looking for that opportunity.
Representative Rosario.
For those who may have concerns about the reentry community, I can take this room out, clear it out, bring in Snoop Dogg and Martha Stewart, and there'll be one felon in the room, and it ain't Snoop Dogg. And that's a fact. So that's basically what I can say to that. You know, people coming home come from all different socioeconomic backgrounds, some with more support, people like a Martha Stewart or others that may have done a white-collar crime, and those may have done maybe something a little more serious. But either way, they're still going to re-entry into the community, and they still need those options.
Charlie.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for those comments, Commissioner. Before I even get to my comments, I want to commend Commissioner Quiros for being a trendsetter. The state of Connecticut DOC is doing amazing work. They're our actual partner with the Connecticut Hall of Change. I think one of the things that needs to be addressed is when people come home. So if the concern is what do these people bring to the community, is there danger, is there fear, we have to also be considerate and do a better job of placing people back into a community. So just because someone might have lived in Bridgeport doesn't mean it's necessarily the best place for them to go back to, because sometimes their past is waiting for them, which draws them back into recidivism. So I think we need to do a little bit better job of trying to figure out where people need to go back to, where they want to go back to, where they need to go back to be most successful at reintegrating without problems.
Thank you. Mark.
Thank you, sir. I think part of the story of Connecticut over the last decade in particular is the use of what works to reduce recidivism. It's the application of the science that has been developed in states across the country of how do you work with people who have touched the criminal justice system in any form, whether they've received a actual sentence of incarceration, or they're under pretrial supervision, or under probation supervision, or under the community supervision population. Across Connecticut's criminal justice system, there's a use of risk and need assessments to identify early on what are the needs. As you can see in the report that is before us today, you see the cross-cutting types of needs that confront populations that are interacting with the criminal justice system. And those tools are also used to prioritize, because we want to help people who don't need further engagement in the criminal justice system to transition out, back to other systems of support, back to the pro-social supports that they have in the family, away from the criminal justice system. But there are other people who need more intensive interventions, and they may need residential supports, they may need intensive housing support, substance addiction, mental health co-occurring. And across the system, you see these systems and processes in place that have helped us to accomplish the outcomes that we can celebrate. Clearly, the press conference made clear there is more we need to build on and grow, but the foundation is strong, and that's what's helped us to achieve the results we've seen already, and I think to grow it into the future.
Thank you, Mark. Go ahead, Robin.
Thank you, Scott. I just want to go back because I think we're talking about post-incarceration, and we really need to be talking about what's happening while they're incarcerated, because we're getting a product of what has been in the system. And when we look at the report and the data, it talks about the key findings, race and ethnicity, employment, education, substance abuse, mental health, medical needs, housing. So what are we doing while people are incarcerated? I want to talk about what can be done, because we're doing some good things, but there's always room for improvement. So I believe that we need to start looking at what we're really doing to habilitate, to Fred's point, and rehabilitate before they come home. There's a transition that needs to take place, and that should happen at the moment they enter the system. We can't wait until it's time for them to come home. We need to make sure that mental health issues are in check, which means we need resources and funding, right? We need to make sure that people are in place that can provide these services. We got to take care of it on the front end, because if we continue to wait till we get to the back end of this, it's going to be a heavier lift, and I don't think that that needs to be the case.
Thank you, Robin. Go ahead, Maggie.
And so in addition to those comments, I think one of the additional areas is if we think about neighborhoods and think about how people are feeling the judgments around individuals who are actually getting incarcerated and coming home and preparing for that. When we look at, as Robin talked about, in prison, how is it the ability to actually take care of all of these key areas and look at what the needs are and the readiness, right? We talked about the readiness for all of this. So then when we look also at, if we look at public housing, so the entire family, so the ripple effect of that, the individual, the family, the neighborhood, the community, everything is impacted. So if that person is now coming back and they don't have any place else to go except for back to mom's house, who lives in public housing, everyone now is at risk of losing their housing. And so we have to look at all of these different areas, and in the community, we need to look at ways that we can change the judgment around this. And as Charlie said, where is it that's gonna be a best fit for this person? And some of that money, as we get to some of the other questions, is about the fact of really, this is all about sustainability. So we can develop programs. Career Resources has all of these great programs. How does that sustain? How do we keep our hands on this individual for longer than 6 months or longer than 12 months? Because they need the support ongoing.
Thank you. Go ahead, Judy.
I think we need the help of the press, frankly, to humanize folks who are coming home. We were impressed today by those voices, and we need to make sure that we're raising up those voices. Mental health issues, given the pandemic, are pervasive in our community. Substance use issues are something that has touched every community. If we allow folks who have been incarcerated to speak the truth of their reality, I think we would be doing a better job. I also just want to say that invite the press to the welcome centers and to see firsthand what they're able to do and what the challenges are. Visiting Best Chance. I took a look at some of the stats, thank you Jim Boucher, that he shared with me in one of the reports that you may think funders don't read those things, but we do. And in fact, during the pandemic, when it was tough to provide services, they enrolled 171 people. 96 got credentials, many of them more than one credential. 82 were employed. 72 sustained that employment for 6 months, which we know is critical. At the Welcome Center, their report said, since opening in 2018, they have served 1,200 people. That's how great the need is. And so I invite everyone to take a closer look at the progress and what more we need.
Thank you. Senator Wong.
And I'll close the loop by offering the Welcome Center is a tremendous model that we should look more, because people always remember when they first get out what the reaction is, and that sets the tone. And if you're welcome back and you're feeling as though there is a pathway, that's a great start. I think the other thing that I think we need to look at to reduce recidivism beyond the ecosystem that I keep on repeating is the power of peer counselors. The ability of someone who has gone through that experience, gone through the same emotional tumult, and to give you the hope that I can do it. Let me show you the way. Let me be your coach and support along the way, because I've gone through the same experience that others that have not can relate to. I think that is one of the most powerful resources that we can provide, is the peer support that continues. Whether it's reducing recidivism or substance abuse, we have seen it work, where the peer support is words cannot describe the connection. So I think that is another factor that I think we should really emphasize on. But the Welcome Center, I've heard so much of a glowing response of this is a good start of a long journey that I have to get to.
All right, here's the next question for you guys. The rise of juvenile crime has become a major topic at almost every dinner table. From your perspective, what do you think or can or should be done to address this issue? Who wants to take that one? All right, go ahead, Maggie.
So I think that the key here is education and support for families, because it is difficult. I work with youth, and it is difficult for, and I'm also a parent, it's difficult for a parent to hear that something is happening with their kid and not take responsibility and ownership and feel like they have not done something right. So it's really about educating the families and supporting the families around this, and looking at where is it and how is it. When we look at mental health, when we look into the school systems and we look and see what is being taught. So it was said earlier around the fact of looking at all the negativity is what is in, is always highlighted. And none of the good things that are happening is highlighted. When I was actually at the Stanford Police Department last week, and we had a panel for vape and diversionary, and the entire room was black and brown. And so my first question to myself was, how is that possible? I don't understand either. How is it possible that no other kids in this school that has 900 students in there of, white race or something of the sort, right, have actually been detained for any of this type of stuff? So again, I think it really has to do with education and information. This too has a stigma on it. It has a stigma that these are black and brown kids who are actually, where the crime is coming from, because we never see any of what the black and brown kids are doing that's great. So it's about education and really getting them on board.
Thank you, Maggie. Go ahead, Chris.
I think it comes down to reconnecting families, because a lot of these juveniles, mom and dad are incarcerated, and many Many times they don't have that connection. They're getting raised by a grandparent or a loved one, and the bandwidth is full. I just want to talk about a personal experience. When I was in, I think, 6th, 7th grade, I had an incident where, all the teachers and administrators, they were, ready to kick me out of school. And I had one teacher that stood up for me and said, did you know Chris's father passed away? Did you know his brother's incarcerated? Did you know his stepfather's incarcerated? You know his uncle's incarcerated? So it's easy to see, the reaction, but what's the root cause of it? So I think that's what's happening right now with our children, with our young men and women out there. There's a reaction. There's a reason why. They're probably, having issues at home. They probably didn't really eat. And that's why they're selling drugs. Not that there's an excuse, but they have to survive. So I think we need to have a reconnection of families and also have some compassion.
Robin, go ahead.
Thank you, Scott. I just want to piggyback off that because I actually have written down root causes. And it's true, we look at the superficial. We never delve deep to find out what's going on. And, I also sit on the Juvenile Justice Policy Oversight Committee, dealing with a lot of juvenile justice issues around suspension, expulsion, school arrest, and it always comes back to the one thing for me. We will look at children and ask them, what's wrong with you? When we should be asking them, what happened to you? What's going on in your life? Because your dad died. Your mom went to prison. We don't know. So we've got to start dealing with that. And the fact that, my son, who is actually here with us, was incarcerated. I was a single mom. And he was trained up in the way he should go. But he had to leave home and deal with a society that wasn't exactly trained up the same way he was. So we need to talk about what our children are dealing with when they leave home, regardless to how they're being groomed, what they're being taught. Because at the end of the day, you gotta survive in them streets. And if that means breaking laws or whatever it is, and sometimes I think what we forget also is that victims become victimizers. And when you have children living in societies where they are being victimized and bullied, robbed at gunpoint, what do you think eventually happens? That kid says, I got to protect myself. So what is he gonna do? He's gonna go get him a gun. So the next time somebody sticks him up, surprise, I got something for you. So let's talk about the fact that mom and dad are working multiple jobs. These kids are at home raising themselves. If we really want to address the issues that we see in the juvenile justice system, we've got to address the elephant in the room, and that is the redlining. That is the lack of sustainable, livable wages for people of color. That is all the things, economic stability, economic justice, social justice, right? All of those justices have to come together so that they can be a core family. Because strong families create strong communities, and strong communities create strong economies.
Who's going to follow up on that one?
Thank you. You've made my job much easier. I just want to raise up that there are organizations in the Hartford area that are doing a good job. In the foundation, in partnership with the City of Hartford and Dalio Philanthropies, brought ROCA, a nationally known model, working with young mothers, and there really wasn't any program that was structured to really help them in all the ways that they need. And so there's a continuum of services that are helping young people that we're talking about in place, and we need to look at those models. But more basically, I want to just quickly mention that one point in my career, I went to detention facilities throughout, it was New Jersey, but you'll appreciate the points. I asked young people who were about to come out in all those facilities, what do you need, what do you want? They'd look at me and say, lady, I need a job. I need a job. Everyone is telling me I need to go back to school. I'm okay with that, but I need to work too. And so I remembered that. The other thing I remember is talking with moms and getting permission to talk with their young adults and saying, lady, you can talk with them, but just don't blame me. And I think sometimes blame the wrong folks.
Commissioner.
I'm going to say structured programs. And as I said it before, I grew up in the inner city Hartford on Park Street. When I look at what went right for me and what went wrong for Brian, because we grew up in the same neighborhood, went to the same school system, hung around with the same people. I end up being the commissioner of correction, and he ends up being incarcerated and have those challenges, life challenges, when he came out. And when I look back at growing up, what saved me was a structured program. My freshman year, that one school teacher, Ms. Lyons, recognized me and says, "Young fella, what are you doing for the summer?" And she signed me up for the Trinity College Brookbound program. So the whole summer, I was living in Trinity, getting my education, getting me ready for the next school year. And I did that for 4 years. And that's probably what saved me from taking the wrong turn. So I'm a big advocate for structured programs, and it's got to start at a very early age, too. It's got to start at a very early age, because I see some of these individuals that grew up with me that are incarcerated, and like Representative Rosario says, their parents, one of the parents was incarcerated. The other parent was addicted to drugs. That kid at 5 years old, really didn't have an opportunity. So these structured programs, when it comes from pre-K, kindergarten, daycare, and so far, these are very important. That will shape these individuals as they grow up and hopefully go in the right direction.
Thank you, Commissioner. Tony.
It's so insightful to hear the various aspects, but it's also important for you to ask the question, because juvenile crime is a public safety concern. And we have seen, and some people mentioned earlier that the media doesn't always help the whole process. They sensationalize and create a unsettling, and it's become a political wedge issue in some cases. And I think that's important to move away from that. Juvenile crime is a critical issue, not only at a historical context, but also we've had 3 years of COVID, where young people were bored, and so we have seen a spike in that, and we have addressed it legislatively and reviewed it. But here's my point: the solutions are critical. Structured programs. Representative Rosario and I are huge advocates of McGivney, Cardinal Sheehan, as well as the Boys and Girls Clubs. And the new Madison campus is going to be remarkable, because not only does it offer recreational and mentoring facilities, it has mental health and supportive health services, that kind of complete unit. And the irony of that location is across the street is a correctional facility. So I think we have to look at the core issues, but you cannot dismiss the reaction of people as they react to juvenile crime. Some of the brazen nonchalant reactions, even in people in this room who are formerly incarcerated and looking at second chances. They are the very people that are impacted by those juveniles who do not respect the law or follow it. That being said, public safety is important, but we need to understand what the underlying reasons are. And it should not be a political issue saying us versus them. It needs to be an issue, acknowledge it's an issue, acknowledge it's a public safety concern, but let's get to the root cause of how we can support it. But the commissioner is absolutely right. We use this a lot, but for 6 degrees of separation, that could be me. And I think every one of us as a policymaker, whether you believe in different approaches or not, we should count our blessings that we have been fortunate to have people who supported us, who have empowered us. Every single one of us remember who that one person or two person are, and that has made all the difference. But we have to recognize that not everybody has that support. So again, juvenile crime, do not dismiss it. It's important, and it's a public safety for all of us. How do we fix it? You got to get to the core issue of why it's happening, and that's the crux of it.
Mark, how about you?
I think Connecticut is a national leader in juvenile justice. It's a state that others look to see what policies we have in the books, what's working. We're a state that gets contacted when challenges arise in states and are looking for different interventions that may work. And I think it was, the juvenile justice system was put under the microscope in those very difficult years when the matter of auto theft and juvenile crime became such a central focus. And my hope is that the work the juvenile justice system did to represent what really works for our young people will add greater durability and engender greater confidence in what we have here in Connecticut well into the future. I'm honored to also serve with Representative Porter on the Juvenile Justice Policy Oversight Committee. And it's a committee composed of people who have lived experience, who work on the front lines of advocacy, work across JJ systems, and there's a constant drive for more reform. What is the next frontier for helping improve outcomes even further for our kids? But there's also been a greater focus on implementation in recent years. How can we make sure that the investments we're making, the reforms that we're instituting are actually achieving the outcomes that we want to see? And I think that's been helpful for the juvenile justice system in Connecticut to be able to demonstrate why it is structured in the way that it is and why that's best positioned to help our kids achieve outcomes. It's unfortunate that it was all layered, that there was a merging of auto theft with juvenile crime. I think that a real positive benefit came in the latest crime report that showed that although motor vehicle theft increased from 2019 to 2020, in the year that followed it went down by 11%, heading in the right direction. I think that points to the work our law enforcement are doing across Connecticut to better work together to address this particular crime challenge. I think it's a very fair, accurate point that auto theft looks very different based on what municipality you're talking about in Connecticut. And there is a fairness and an equity issue there, that the larger cities in Connecticut have had and do have higher rates of auto theft than the statewide auto theft rate, and they have higher auto theft rates than many of the suburbs that experience the increases. So you can both have a higher number of reported auto thefts per capita year over year in many of our largest cities and see a smaller volume in other jurisdictions, but see a big increase. That actually helped in some ways to bring together our regions of Connecticut. We speak a lot about how too often we're located within one particular municipality and work together across town or city lines, but you see strategies being developed among law enforcement in partnership with community members to address that particular crime challenge. But at the end of the day, if you look at the Public Act that was enacted on a very bipartisan basis, I know there are people in the room here who oppose that and are probably not pleased with me mentioning it, but it did pass, and there are no changes in that law that direct more youth into the adult system. There are no automatic referral to secure incarceration. It made very kind of across the board, but very modest adjustments to achieve better outcomes. It didn't discard what's been built in Connecticut in our juvenile justice system. It just tightened some areas of it, addressed some issues, and allowed us to move forward. And we have a new opportunity this session to look at what, as I said earlier, and the JJPOC looks at, is what is the next frontier for juvenile justice in Connecticut, and indeed we know that it will influence where the country goes.
Thank you very much, Mark. Now, we're all sitting here today, we're all advocates, we all care deeply about reentry and second chance issues. What can we do or should we be doing to promote this work, not just to us in the reentry field, but to a larger audience and to the general public? Why don't you take that one on? Commissioner.
We have to continue having these difficult conversations. We need to be real, and we need to be honest with ourselves. What are we going to do as the commissioner of the Department of Correction? What are the elected officials are going to do to continue to address this situation so that we're investing smart, because we're going to have to invest in these individuals. We're going to have to continue to invest in these individuals. The more you invest, the better the outcomes are going to be. So let's just continue to have that hard conversation. And the easy job for me is that I let the governor and the elected officials figure out where the funding is going to come from. You know, that is not my job. So it is not my job. It's not my job to figure out where that $6.5 million, where that closure facility is going. That is the governor's, OPM, and the elected officials to figure out where that fund's going to go. But it'd be smart to continue to invest in these individuals that are coming back out into the community.
Thank you, Commissioner. Robin?
I think we have to talk about the intersections because it's not just the reentry folks, right? We look at what the key findings were. So jobs are important. We need to be partnering with employers more so than we are now. People need a job. I take that back. People need a career. Because folks want to get married, they want to have children, they want to have families, and they want to be productive citizens. We talk about mental health and just health care in general. We need to find a way to make sure that people have health care. You know, and we saw this with the pandemic, the impact that that had on folks. So I think we have to talk about it in a more general way, right, organic way, that relates to every aspect of life, not just the fact that people are coming home from prison, but people are looking to live in a way that we dream of living. We talk about the American dream, let's be real. For a lot of people in the district I represent, it's the American nightmare because they have not had an opportunity, right? We talk about a second chance. They haven't had a first chance.
That's right.
So we need to make sure that we are not just lip service, but foot service. Not just talking the talk, but walking the walk. And what better place to do that than in this building this year, right now? Because it's always the right time to do the right thing. And we know what we need to do. It's the political will, right, that needs to come along. And it is also the lived experiences of people that need to have an opportunity to be at these tables of power. I think it was you, Fred, that said if you wasn't at the table, you was on the menu. Well, I'm here to tell you, I'm at the table, and I'm still on the menu. So what I'm saying is we need to build some new tables, right? We know that this is a system that is not working. What are we going to do about it? Do we continue to try to reform what was built to do what it's doing? Or do we rebuild what should have been in the beginning? So I think it's the honest conversations of people being in the room and being honest about why we're even having to have these conversations centuries after slavery was undone. A lot of this is rooted and grounded in that system. So I think we have to talk about the elephant in the room because we put the lipstick on, the lampshade on, but the elephant is still in the room. And we need to be honest about what we need to do and make sure we're doing what we need to do for people and not what we want to do for ourselves.
Thank you, Robert. Chris?
Thank you, Representative. I do want to piggyback on what the commissioner said, and going back to being smart with our spending, because we can stay within that silo of corrections, but when somebody comes home, they're literally touching many different departments. You need an ID, you have to go to the DMV. You need mental health issues, you need to get checked up. You got diabetes, you got high blood pressure, you have to go to a local federally qualified healthcare center. So we have to make sure that us as legislators, we spread these dollars around to literally follow that person through each walk of life that they're going to encounter.
Thank you. Maggie, I know Maggie wanted to go.
So, ditto to all of that and the relationship building and just really connecting with everyone, not just looking at reintegration and just looking at reentry, but looking at, nonprofits and for-profits and faith-based and looking at communities as a whole. And then also support developing at all points of interest, right? Entry, whether it's prevention, whether it's reentry while in prison, while actually looking for work, things of that sort. And then we have to also continue to tap into communication with advocate groups and with deflection around with the criminal justice system. Commissioner, thank you, because through the Hall of Change, as an inductee, we go into and we talk to the cadets all the time, right? And that's all about like really kind of bringing some hope to, so that individuals, before they even hit the ground ready to work, that they've heard from someone who's experienced being inside, and the only thing that I wanted was to be seen as a human being as opposed to a number. And to be able to just kind of say that, right? And then I too, I wanted work and I wanted a career, but these programs were not around when I was coming out of prison. So the same year that I stopped, I was no longer homeless. I was also no longer getting incarcerated. I also stopped using drugs the same year, right? So all of that happened the same time. These programs were not there, and I did have my mom, right? I did have my mom, but my mom also said, don't call me to come and get you. Just call me and let me know that you're okay. And when you're ready to come back, then we'll go from there. But she was not doing that whole kind of, come and get me from, so it's about really making sure that we're real people. We're real people. We're not just numbers. We're not just a dollar. And the sustainability around that whole thing, I can get a job and go for one of the women who actually I work with who came from prison just the other day, and she's in treatment, and she had a job through Dunkin' Donuts. But then she has a child, right? And in order to keep that job, she needs to give up her health care because they wouldn't pay for her to, so she was making too much to meet this. And one more point around the health care that was said, for youth, when we start to look at youth and we're looking at that whole thing, the first thing that needs to happen is they need to actually get a physical. Some of the stuff that's happening is mental health, some is also medical. So we can't miss that point either.
Thank you. Judy?
We've heard a lot about the challenges, and I just want to say we really do need to continue to have these very challenging conversations. The stigma of incarceration hardly ever goes away. The stigma, and then you add to that, we've seen the stats of the disproportionate number of people of color, Black and Latinx, incarcerated. So you add racial discrimination, discrimination around ethnicity, plus the stigma of incarceration, and as we pointed out, it's very difficult to succeed. So Representative Porter also mentioned the need to engage employers in these conversations, not just when people are trained, but throughout the training, because you want them to be ready to hire and really to see who this person is, what they need, and to, again, make sure they understand that they're a person just like them, wanting some of the same things. I also challenge us to bring landlords to the table who need to understand that what these folks want is not dramatically different from what they need as well.
Tony?
I think Judy said it very well that, formerly incarcerated is the scarlet letter of the 21st century. It's forever with you. And you see that with a lot of even though record erasures of the drug utilization, it stays with people. But if we're going to look at solutions, we're here in the General Assembly and the legislative process and government, but it has to be a public-private endeavor. I can't say enough about the great work that Judy and the foundation has done to bring businesses and Mr. Gardner with Hang Time to bring businesses into the fold, because as many of our colleagues said, having a job and having a career is defining. But are you going to get employers who's willing to give that second chance? I know in the Bridgeport area with Chris's leadership, and again, Senator Gomes, Senator Gaston, Senator Moore, here's the deal. We've got employers that are willing to take on, through your connection of career resources, getting those people employed. But it was private employers that took these people in. So I want to give props to Hang Time and to Judy and all of our great private enterprises that make things work. Wait, you look different. So maybe you can speak on Charlie with Hang Time. Fred.
No, well, I know I've been going to Hang Time, but I'm not a participant of Hang Time. But I'd just like to speak to the issue of when you had talked about what can you do different and moving forward. and that is with the municipalities. I keep saying this because somehow, you know, I can ride all over the state and I can see X amount of millions of dollars being from the government, from our government, giving them money to certain projects that's going up. You know, and I'm a taxpayer, and individuals who are formerly incarcerated are taxpayers. But there's no ordinance that a certain percentage of individuals who were formerly incarcerated get a percentages of them jobs. Now I understand that career resources and a lot of our agencies are doing good work, but I think that our legislators and our government can get more involved also, and also demand that certain, when they're giving money that taxpayers are giving, that they also should have a stake in that you hire people that look like myself who've been incarcerated. And that's not happening. I can ride all over the state. I see Governor Lamont and the state donated X $1 million. But who are getting the jobs from that? It's not people that look like me. It's not the people who've been incarcerated. And to Kuro's point also, instruction, and everybody don't want to go to school academically. Vocational skills. When I was coming up in Bridgeport, Connecticut, they had trades inside the schools. There's no trades nowhere in the schools today. Now, everybody don't want to play basketball. So we have to bring back trades again. We have to really think about people that work with their hands. Have you ever seen a young kid who played video games? You see how fast he can work this with his hands? He's not being creative. His creativity is not being brought out. And our state is not being responsible enough to bring these things out in the schools with structured environment. And me being formerly incarcerated, we gotta have someone like myself, and not just me, at these tables and at these forums every time that we have them. We got to have somebody like myself. Thank you.
And Fred, thank you very much for that. And I think we're probably going to end at this point because I want to be conscious of everybody's time. I just want to say that this dialogue and these conversations need to continue. Clearly, a lot of good information that was shared today. I also want to thank each and every one of you personally. You're out there in this fight, and you're doing God's work, and we know it's not easy. I want you to know we have your back in the community, and we're very thankful for the efforts that you put in every single day, not only to change legislation and policy, but for your deeply caring of returning citizens. So thank you very much for that, and we've got your back in this next session. Thank you.